Thank you. Good afternoon, members, and welcome to this special meeting of the Nithsdale Area Committee. This meeting is being recorded, and the recording will be made available on the Council website for public listening. Can I remind members to follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off their video when you're not addressing the meeting. Should you wish to contribute to any item, you should write speak in the Teams chat function, and you'll be invited to speak in order about new issues. Should your question or issue be raised by a previous speaker, please withdraw your request so that we deal with the business as efficiently as possible. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. If any member has to leave the meeting for any reason, can remind you either leave the Teams meeting for that period or time, or you could write leave in the Teams chat function and then join. This will allow us to monitor members' presence. And I agree to the remote participation of members today. Claire, can you provide the sediment and apologies, including who is participating remotely, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I've got 2 apologies so far today from Councillors Bell and Blake. 10 members participating on Teams and 6 members currently not present. The members currently not present are Councillors Charteris, Ferguson, Murray, Nicholson, Ronnie and Wood, all others present on Teams.
Thank you, Claire. Members, anyone have declaration of interest in this agenda? I don't see any indication, so I'll take it there are no declarations of interest. We have the minutes of meeting of 10th of March 2021. This is for noting, as the minute has been already approved at the council meeting on 24th of June. Although I will take observations if any members have anything they want to comment on in relation to the minute. I've got David McKee.
Chair, can we have an update on items 6 and 7, the disposal of land, pavilion, garden and car park at the Kingham and the land at the corner of Newton Road? Is there an update available, please?
I'll ask members or officers to bring that to the next meeting of the Nithsdale Area Committee, because it's no acceptable to ask that kind of thing just off the cuff, but happy to do that, Councillor McKee. Fiona, can you ensure that an update either sent separately to members if we have one, or that one might be made available at the next regular meeting of the Nithsdale Area Committee, please?
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks, Fiona.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McKee. Any other members? No. Okay. In that case, members, we move to agenda item number 4. Members will recall that at the meeting of this committee on 12th of May, members requested a seminar to discuss some discretionary budget priorities and the process for the poverty and inequality budget, which I'm pleased to see the discussion which is reflected in this report. The report provides further consideration for members with regard to the Christmas light provision for Dumfries, Kirkconnell, Thornhill and Sanquhar, with consideration of a multi-year contract for the lights to consider the COVID-19 renew restart budget and the draft priorities, eligibility and criteria for this area committee poverty and inequalities grants 2021-2022. We're joined this afternoon by Derek Hexel and Wendy Jesson to answer any member questions. I'm happy to open up for questions. Derek and Wendy, I did see them, so I'm delighted to welcome you today. Thanks for being here, and they'll assist members with any questions. It might be prudent, members, if we just deal with the recommendations on a sequential basis, although I'm happy to do it in any other fashion members wish. See, the leader has arrived, being a minute late. Well done, leader. Welcome. So the recommendation we are asked to consider in 1 is to agree a multi-year contract for Christmas lights for 2 years with a possibility of a 1-year extension, as outlined in paragraph 3.8 of this paper for Dumfries, Kirkconnell, Sanquhar and Thornhill, with an annual allocation of up to £41,000, with a suitable clause which indicates the contract is subject to funding being made available in future years. Any members, any questions or observations? Councillor Hislop.
Chair, it's with regard to the figure of 41,000. did we get a heads up from some of the companies that in the past have supplied us as to that would be about the figure? And if we haven't got that heads up, what delegations do officers have to accept an offer on the grounds of, if we can't afford to do the 4 places, we could only afford to do 3 of them? Do they have the ability to say, Kirkconnell, Sanquhar and Thornhill get them, but Dumfries doesn't? Because I'm asking the question because just the other day I heard the likes of steel pre-Christmas was £400 per tonne. It's now up over 1,000. And if we are going to be purchasing new lights, and if there's new infrastructure to make, if there's any steel in it, that could look at more than doubling the price of the steel in the infrastructure. Have we any idea to know if that is suitable to give us what we want?
I would imagine Derek will have all these answers. I would suggest that it's not appropriate to cancel out communities because that's not the delegation we gave to Derek and Rhodes' colleagues, and I believe they did go through a process of inviting tenders, and this appears to be the best one. But Derek, have you? And I take it these Christmas lights are not made with steel, but can you help Councillor Hislop with that, and then Councillor McKee wanting to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Afternoon, members. Yes, colleagues from Rhodes did do some investigative work with previous suppliers and other suppliers, and the indicative cost based on the same quality, quantity and motifs as were provided in 2020, the indicative allocation, should we go for a 2-year with the possibility of a 1-year extension, would be £41,000 would be a realistic fee for a contract annually. In addition, you'll recall that officers have highlighted that some of the infrastructure, so the bolts, the connectors, some of the fittings were needing replaced, and the estimate for that works was 9,000. So the total allocation that Rhodes were looking for the contract in year 1 would be £50,000. Members will recall at the May meeting, we gave an indicative allocation of £57,500, I think it was. So there's still £7,000 that if members wanted to make that £7,000 available, should costs rise or to add additional motifs, then that's absolutely within your gift. But based on what we had in previous years, officer recommendations is that they would require £41,000. I hope that helps, Chair.
Thanks very much, Derek. I'm sure that helps. And I'll come back. Ivor, are you happy with that?
It was just if in previous years we've had a uprated budget of 57 and it was 35,000 we used to. What was the other money used for? Was it not used for additional lights and stuff? Likes of the Christmas tree at Greyfriars Church, was that not included? And will there be sufficient money to cover anything additional that we had previous years within the budget that we've allocated?
We'll come back to that, Ivor, because I think the Christmas trees are different. They're no part of the Christmas lights. The Christmas light was a contract, an external organisation. I'm sure we purchased the trees from Buccleuch, I'm not sure, but I think that's where they were sourced, certainly for some distance away and brought to the town. And there's one up in Sanquhar and Kirkconnell as well, and I'm sure that they too were provided by Land and Street Services rather than the road service. This is specifically for lights and nothing more than lights, but happy to get into a wider discussion if need be once we sort out the lights issue.
Chair, it was just the fact that if it was 35,000 last year and we allocated a budget of 50,000, where's the other 15,000 went?
Well, it's not for us to worry about that, because what we've asked for is an estimate or a bid for work. Derek has secured a bid that seems to be reasonable, and we're now being asked to consider it. So we're certainly not going to go and discuss. You can do that offline, Ivor, but we're not going to discuss what happened before. What we're saying is, for the lights that would have been put up in Dumfries, Kirkconnell, Sanquhar and Thornhill, the cost of £41,000 per annum for a 2-year contract plus an option of a third, and subject to funding made available in future years. Happy to you to cut the rest with Derek, but we're simply dealing with the issue before us today. I'll come back to you at the end, Ivor. I've got Councillor McKee and then Councillor Martin.
Aye, thanks, Chair. I was just looking at paragraph 3.1, where at the meeting on the 12th of May, we agreed an allocation for Christmas lights, and this is you back with a positive, I would assume a positive figure, and I'd be quite happy to work with that. The money is in our budget, so it'll be used for things that we want done. Now, I'd be quite happy to support this, Chair, and I wouldn't, if we need a wee bit more money for the likes of Kirkconnell, Sankard and Thornhill, then we find that money and make sure their lights are up to the usual standard as well.
I'm very grateful to have that, Councillor McKee. It's a helpful proposal. Councillor Martin, John.
Can you hear you, John?
He doesn't appear to be muted, though.
No, as I say,
Oh, you're there.
I'm just wondering, in the past, for the school's Christmas lights competition, where the primaries in Dumfries, they designed and the 3 lights got made to go up, is that going to continue? Has it been put? Is the cost been put in amongst the 41,000, or is it being discontinued? The school's Christmas light competition.
I would think at the moment we didn't explore that because we didn't know whether we'd have the right budget or whether members would agree to that. And it's probably too late in the day because they don't go back to school until August. It'd probably take a month for the kids to draw up their things, and that'd be too late to get the lighting, although I'll ask Derek. But I'm quite sure we did agree at the May meeting that if we had to purchase lights because of the very short time scale, it would be just standard ones rather than specifically designed by kids. Derek, can you just
sorry, Jim, I did ask that at the May meeting.
All right, okay.
Yeah, I think what was fed back, Chair, was that the Christmas light competition where the kids did the design competition was an additional arrangement with that particular supplier who could do it within the timescales that we had. Obviously, we would need to go through the procurement process and find out who the supplier is, and then we could pick up a conversation at that point. And as I understand it, the competition was always undertaken relatively late in the year. So I think there probably would be time to negotiate that with the light suppliers, Chair, if the committee was interested in running that competition and had budget left, but it's not included within the 41,000, I'm afraid.
No, that sounds good. We'll get back to that too with members. We've got that's a suggestion from John that we'll pick up in the debate as we go forward before we make a final decision. And Councillor McKee made a very salient point for me, because I think there are 4 sockets up in street lights in Sankard where there's never in the last few years only lights installed. So I would hope that in every settlement we would not put up new connections, but we would ensure that every connection on the street lights has a Christmas decoration attached rather than, and I think it was just shrunk because as some decorations broke, there was no available stuff, so they just simply contracted the designs to the central part and the communities. So Councillor McKee is probably right that all 4 Kirkconnell, Sankard, Thornhill and Dumfries should really have a Christmas festive light up if we have at some stage installed a socket in the past to accommodate that. So that would be what I'd hope we'd agree. John Martin, is your hand a new one, or is it an old one that's not been doing?
Sorry, Chair, it's an old one.
Thanks, John. So we have a proposal from Councillor McKee, and I'll come back to Councillor Hislop because I would prefer it, Councillor Hislop, if conversations were taken offline in respect of what we did before, because this is a new proposal from officers on our request, and we're being asked to agree 41,000 plus 9, and the other 7 or whatever it is, 7.5, Derek, might be allowed as a cushion, if you like, in case costs have increased slightly, and in case one or two other lights need to be purchased to ensure that we do cover every socket with a decoration of some kind in the 4 communities. And I take it, I don't know whether you're able to confirm or no, Derek, but I'm sure the Christmas trees were never part of the industrial area commitment. They came from a different source.
That's my understanding, Chair. Fiona might be on the call. Fiona may, I know she worked closely with the Kirkconnell tree this year, but my understanding is that the tree and the lights on the trees come from a different department.
Thanks for that. So, Ivor, do you anything else you want to feed in before we go? Oh, here's Fiona. Fiona, can you confirm for us where the trees come from and who installs and where the cost comes from?
Yeah, my understanding is that's covered by community assets, Jim.
Brilliant. I didn't think it was necessarily the committee because it's never been discussed in the past. So, Ivor, if you're content with that,
Chair, I'm happy with the fact of what we're allocating. My only concern is, in previous years we've allocated over 50,000. This year we're allocating 50,000 specifically to this contract and fixing the fixtures. What was the money used for before, and will we lose out on what that money was used for previously because it's not there, because we're spending more on the actual lights? You know, it must have been used for something previously. So are we going to lose out on that, and is it an unknown consequence of what we're going to do today? That was just my concern, but I'm happy to support the 41,000 allocated towards the lights and the 9,000 for the fixtures and fittings. It's just,
are you happy to let the other 7 sit as a cushion or a means of ensuring that every community has the lights linked to the socket?
yes, I am. Yeah.
And Derek, can you then provide Ivor with additional information he's looking for? It may be that the costs have reduced, or they may be more aggressive with their pricing this year, or it may be something we've overlooked, and you could maybe report that back to the September committee, because I presume if we've agreed this, that will allow you to take the acquisition forward, and if there are unforeseen costs or if we've missed something, there'll be time enough in September to catch that up before we get to the Christmas installation itself. Does that sound logical, Derek?
Yeah, I'm happy to pick that up, Chair, and report back to get a detailed breakdown from colleagues at Rhodes on the previous allocations. As I understand it, the contract was sorted out a number of years ago when costs were higher. We did get a special deal last year. The £35,000 was because those Christmas lights were at the end of their life and there wasn't as many of them either. So we did get a special deal last year. And so this year, the officers feel that the £41,000 reflects the costs and the discussions they've had. So I'm happy to pick that up and get a detailed breakdown and report that back. In terms of the new contract, Chair, I think we do need to make a commitment of an allocation. I think that's where we're heading with the 41,000, and to allow officers to take forward the procurement process, which should be completed by, I think it was the end of August, early September. And so that would allow us to come back with any issues to the September area committee.
Super. And would it be simpler then to allocate 41,000 plus the 7.5 that we have as spare to the Christmas lights? That would make it 48.5. That would give the flexibility, and the 9,000 fixed because it's a bid from council departments internally. That would deal with the surplus. It would leave a bit of flexibility for you, and it would allow you, if there's a couple of more lights required somewhere, just to agree with the contractor that would form part of the contract going forward.
Absolutely, Chair, that would provide that flexibility. We could also, if members were minded, we could also look to build in that competition that Councillor Martin raised. If we were looking to allocate the additional 7,560 at this stage, that may allow us to have those negotiations as well.
I think that would be really helpful, and I would be enthusiastic if the kids do it, because it was well received in every community the last time that happened, which was a few years ago. So if that's a proposal from Councillor Martin, we can encapsulate that in the overall recommendation. So members, it would appear we kind of have a consensus. Is there anyone not comfortable with 48.5 being allocated for the lights and Christmas competition, 9,000 for the works that roads contractor, roads colleagues have presented, and an investigation made by Derek on the issues that I've raised and reporting back to the September committee? I've got the leader saying she agrees with these recommendations. Jeff Lever agrees. Are there any members otherwise minded? In that case, I'll ask you at the very end, Derek and Fiona, just to sum up exactly what John Campbell is also happy to agree, sum up what we've decided, and that will keep us all right in terms of the overall recommendations. So that seems to be that we've managed to deal with we have dealt with recommendation number 1. Number 2 is a carry on. That's the £9,000 we've discussed. So that's no part of the 41. So agree the recommendation 1 will be as set out in the paper, although the 41,000 will come to 48.5. And that will allow the officers flexibility and the opportunity to add a few designs if need be, to ensure that every community has the number that was initially catered for by the number of sockets that were in each community. So it seems we've dealt with 9,000 as well, because there was no dissent about that. So we come to recommendation 3, and we are being asked to agree to retain the COVID-19 Renew and Restart budget of £19,020, which will allow us to respond to any future identified need this financial year, as detailed in paragraph 313. We did have a discussion at the seminar, but that's certainly no decision-making process. It's here decisions will be made. So that's the recommendation from officers. If anyone is otherwise minded, please let me know. Otherwise, we will simply consider this later on in this financial year. I think we did in the May meeting suggest that it might be September would be a good time to reflect on where we are. So you might want to add an agenda item or recommendation 3, a further report brought to the September meeting.
I think given the way things are going, Chair, it would be sensible to retain it until September at least.
Thanks for that, Councillor McKee. If there's anybody otherwise minded, please let me know. If no, we will look forward to a brief report, because we already had the discussion in the May meeting. We've got this report today, so it'll just be an invitation in September as to whether or no we're ready to utilise that money, or whether we still want to continue that forward further into this financial year. So I wouldn't want Derek, or us want Derek, having a lot of work to do. He's already done the work on it. It's just a case of when and if we want to release it, or if we want to use it for some other COVID or Renew Restart purpose. Members are happy with that. You content with that, Derek?
Yeah, that's fine, Chair. Thank you.
Agreed.
If everybody's happy with that, okay, we'll move on to agenda item 4. And I know Wendy's with us here. We will consider and agree how the remaining discretionary budget, £75,627.71 should be allocated as outlined in paragraph 314 and 315. We're also being asked to agree the priorities, eligibility and criteria for the National Area Committee Poverty and Inequalities Grants 2021-22 detailed in Appendix 2, and agree to open for application this Area Committee Poverty and Inequalities Grant 2021-22 and the timetable outlined in paragraph 318. So I'm happy to have members come in at this stage with any suggestions they might have. It's a significant amount of money, and I wouldn't want to see us sit in this if we could help the wider community recover from the lockdown and from the impact of COVID. Wendy, if you have anything you want to say at this stage, are you happy to wait and see what members have to say?
Good afternoon, Chair. Afternoon, members. I'm happy. I don't have anything else to add at this time, and myself and Derek are happy to answer any questions in relation to this, to these numbers. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Tracy, Tracy Little, please, Provost.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to ask a wee question for clarity on the eligibility part on point number 4. It says requests for 100% of the total cost of the project will not be considered, but will 99.9% be considered? What's the percentage? Where's the block off? How do we figure that out to make it fair?
Derek or Wendy?
Do you want to go, Wendy, or do you want...
Yep, I'm happy to come in, Derek, if that would help. So previously, thank you so much, Councillor Little. Previously, applications would normally come in for about 75 to 80% of the project costs. In relation to applications for the Nestdale Area Committee, we did sometimes get applications for up to 100%. And what we did within the report that accompanies within the appendix that accompanies the report that goes back to members for you to make the decision on the funding allocations, we would note that 100% of the funding had been requested, but that the scoring panel would recommend something approximately maybe 75–80%, so that there was some emphasis on the applicant to at least source some of the funding from elsewhere, so that the project wasn't running with total 100% of Nestdale Area Committee funding, because then there's less risk of the project maybe failing and all of the funding coming from one source. But obviously we would put all the recommendations to elected members, and within the appendix of the report the detail would all be there as to how much of a percentage each applicant had requested and what the recommendations would be from the scoring panel at that time. But again, it is up to members to make the decision as to how much they want to fund each application. But we did have that section in the eligibility before, just to try and encourage applicants to go elsewhere for a small amount of funding rather than come to Nestdale Area Committee for it all. Does that help to answer that query?
Can I come back in, Chair?
Yeah, Tracy, aye.
It does. It makes sense, the reasoning why we wouldn't have 100%, but I still think it seems a little bit unclear. I mean, if you're saying sometimes it's 75% or 80%, how do we work that out? How does the scoring panel work that out? And as some people get 75, some people 80, would it not be better if there was like that was actually set in stone? How much of a percentage?
The problem is
that would apply.
I think the problem is, Tracy, we decide.
Yeah.
The scoring panel look at all these applications in their professional capacity. They make a recommendation to us, but we decide. So we could sit and consider the applications and say that the application from Wendy Jesson is very poor and the application from Jim Dempster is very good, and we could decide to fund Jim Dempster, which would be very useful, a higher degree than Wendy. But so we have discretion to apply, but officers don't. They have a very black and white approach. They will look at the application, they'll look at the source of funding, they'll look at the merits application, and they simply recommend to us. And we have the flexibility to change that or amend it as we see fit. I'll come back to you, Tracy. I've got
just to illustrate that point from the scoring panel's perspective. If somebody was coming in, if it was the exact same project, and somebody was coming in for 99% and somebody was coming in for 50% and everything else was equal, there would be a 15-point difference, because the one coming in for 50% would get positive points around, I think it's about 5 points you get for requesting 50%. The person who's requesting 99%, because you can't request 100, would lose 10 points. So there would be a 15-point difference between the two projects. And that's how the scoring panel determine their recommendations. But absolutely, they would all come to members, and it would be for members to make the final determination.
Thanks. Yeah. That actually makes it a lot clearer, actually, when you describe it like that. That makes it clear. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. And that's really helpful, because at the end of the day, Derek could bring forward these recommendations, but it could be that one of the projects is fantastic. There's just nobody able to get any support, and we might want to change that despite the fact that that's their professional judgment and we have the flexibility. I've got Dave McKee, Ivor Hislop and John Martin in that order.
Is there any mileage in the small grants up to £1,000? It's kind of doubtful, some of the reading of the papers, that you're not entirely confident that there'll be sufficient out there to bid in for some of this money. Is it worthwhile opening that?
I think that's what we're trying to agree not to joke. That's the 19,500 that we're setting aside and getting a report back in September, because we felt that some of the applicants last time haven't managed to use the £1,000 that they got, and some groups are just asking for it, being unkind because it happened to be there. So we wanted a far more aggressive approach on how that money might be used, or a far better feel for how it might benefit different communities. And on that basis, we decided to set that aside, or we are being asked to set it aside until September. And if it becomes clear later on in the year that there are certain groups or sections of the community that need particular support, we'll have that money at that time to go and directly support them, rather than just open up £1,000 grants for the sake of it at the moment, because there's no evidence, either with officers or elected members that I can recall, having spoken to a number of them, that there's folk looking desperately for money today. So it was on that basis the suggestion was that it was simply set and gives the flexibility later in the year.
I think given what communities have been through, they're maybe still not in a position to do that, and I think waiting to September would be a sensible move, Chair. So I'd be happy with that.
Thanks very much, Councillor McKee. Councillor Hislop?
Chair, there's been a few kind of projects came through various committees this last wee while, and within them we have things that says this one's not getting paid, that one's not getting paid, the next one's not getting paid. But the sort of reasoning behind it's not just apparently clear. As we are going to be looking at this in September to make a decision, could we have it quite, plain English, shall we say, and not too long? Because sometimes if you get a long screed of words, it can confuse you more than just a basic, it doesn't meet this eligibility criteria, therefore it wasn't considered. Because we are setting those criteria today, so if it's not eligible, it's not considered. And the points, it met some of the points within, etc. Therefore, it got maybe 6 points instead of 10, if it was only 2/3 of the way there, things like that, so that we understand, because we get asked by the applicants, why didn't I get, but they did. And if we've got a kind of clear thing there that we can, as members, go back to them and say, well, the reason we took that decision is because clearly you don't meet the criteria for a constituted body. That's why you didn't get considered. That makes it easier, and they can then understand why we've made a decision. So could that be incorporated within the report that comes back in December?
September even? Derek?
That would be better.
Absolutely, Chair, through you. Happy to include a breakdown of the scores. In fact, we did that for the last round of discretionary budgets for Nithsdale Area Committee when we had open applications. So more than happy to reintroduce that for the poverty money, just to give members more clarity on how we've arrived at a specific score.
Brilliant, and that might include, just for our benefit, although it be a public document, but one was declined, or we recommend no award because this is the set of circumstances that caused us to come to that decision. Does that sound right?
Yeah, if it's recommended for a nil award, we will put a sentence in as to why it's been recommended for a nil award. So it may be it's asking for 100%, might not be a constituted group. They might be asking over, if members agree, the £10,000, £20,000 upper limit. They may be asking for over that. So officers would be tied to recommend nil award because it's ineligible, but ultimately it's for members then to understand what the scoring panel recommendation is based on, and they may wish to use their discretion, which officers don't have.
Brilliant, thank you. And that brings us back to the point Tracy made as well, and I'm sure it was a discussion either at the seminar or in the main meeting, that we might want to fund a project that's a fantastic project, but they need more than £20,000, and we have this discretion that officers don't have, and that will form part of our consideration after receiving your report. John Martin, please.
Chair, I actually lowered my hand because Derek had already answered the question that I was going to ask.
Okay. Okay, members. So the recommendation is to consider and agree how the remaining discretionary budget of £75,627.71 should be allocated as outlined in paragraph 314 and 315. Members will have scrutinised these two paragraphs.
Chair, just for clarity, because you're looking to agree the underspend from the Christmas lights to be used as a contingency in the Christmas lights, that figure will actually be down to the £68,067.71. So that's the figure that's included in Appendix 1 on page 15 of your papers, because I had added on the underspend to that total. But if you're looking to use that in your Christmas lights, it'll be just over the 68,000 remaining.
Members are content with that explanation for Derek?
Agreed.
Okay, so how do we propose to use this money? We have a proposal from Derek on 317, which is the time scale, or it's maybe for Wendy. Is it Derek or Wendy?
So that money there, Chair, that's the remaining discretionary budget. So that's the money that's remaining from your discretionary budget this year, not your tackling poverty money.
Oh, right, aye. You're
So
right.
there's a couple of options in 315 based on other areas where they've maybe opened for up to the £1,000 grants, general grants. There's the opportunity maybe to take it forward to September or later on in this financial year, just in case it's required for additional expenditure, or members may wish to agree to roll it forward to next year's budget. There's a number of options available for members.
Okay, do I have any proposals for any members on what we do with our discretionary budget?
I'd bring it forward to the September committee, Chair.
Well, if we're doing that, we're going to have to make a decision in September. Either, if that, I'm happy if members agree that, but given this is July, we don't have a long time. We either agree at that time to use some of all of it or none of it, because we can't just keep it rolling on to October and then February. We should really make a decision then. It's halfway through our new or current financial year. So I would hope that at that time members will reflect on the fact that we have £68,000 and whether we release some, all or none of it. I don't have a preference one way or the other. I'm happy to be guided from other members, but happy to take that proposal, Councillor McKee, that we're in it to September, and then hopefully members will agree at that time to draw this to a close rather than have Derek turn up every month wondering what we're going to do with £68,000. So a definitive decision in September would be appreciated, some, all or none, and happy to agree with Councillor McKee if that's what other members want, to roll this figure forward to September for a decision at that time.
Jim, if we roll it
Oh,
to
sorry.
September, are we still open to get people vote what to come in for grants up to £1,000 up to September?
No. What we're saying is nothing will happen until September. Councillor McKee was talking, we had three budgets, Davy. We had one nearly 20 grand, and Derek had brought a report saying we might want to consider small grants to community groups until that money was exhausted. So we've decided not to use that money until September, and we'll then decide what to do with it. This, although it says £1,000, we could change that to £20,000 minimum bid for this money. It's at our discretion. So the proposal for David McKee was that we don't have any bids at all until September, and at that time we sort out the 19,500 and we sort out the 6,000 to 8,000. They're both discretionary, that we can determine what to do with them. That was the proposal. If yours is different, Davy, happy to do that, but we'll have to get a consensus sometime.
With due respect, Chair, I took the view that between now and September, given what communities have gone through with COVID and whatnot, they may have projects that they'd like to get up and running. And if they know that they could bid into the council and that there could be funding for them in September, they may be happy to go with that. I'd like to leave it open for them to put a bid in, but the decision won't be made before September, and the officers will be able to advise us.
That's no good, because members might want to roll it into next year's budget, in which case there would be no money to give out. So we'll have to decide whether or no we're opening up bids to this fund. You can't say we'll keep it to September and at the same time tell folk to prepare bids, because that would be unreasonable. At this moment in time, what has been suggested is that we roll everything forward. And if there are different views, then fine. I've got Leader want to speak for the first time, and then I'll come back. Tracy, you after that. Leader?
Right, thanks, Chair. The third wave of COVID is currently underway. We're not in the position that we're out of COVID by any means yet. I mean, we're now seeing, in fact, higher levels of infection in much of the country than there was even in the second wave. So we actually don't know where we are. I don't think organisations will be opening up all that much at the moment, because there's still issues around, people having to self-isolate if somebody else that's been in the premises has tests positive for COVID and so on. I actually think we'd be as well waiting until September, when we actually know whether or not things have opened up, and organisations will be better able to assess what they might need in the future. I think this is probably premature to open it up now, when we're actually just seeing the third wave going underway. Thanks.
Thanks, Leader. Tracy?
Thanks, Chair. Totally agree with the leader there, but I wanted to ask if there has been any community or organisation provisional inquiries about funding. Have we had any interest at all?
I'll ask Derek to reply, but it wouldn't be fair even if we spoke to them, because other community groups are not being made aware that there's money available. Derek?
Absolutely right, Chair. We're keen to manage expectations. Community groups would always welcome funding, and we would always welcome, helping them to attract that funding to their organisation. In section 3.12 of the report, we did engage with colleagues across the ward working unit, other ward officers across Nithsdale, and we also engaged with our community health and wellbeing colleagues, all of whom are actively engaged with community groups across Nithsdale. And some of the suggestions from them were there, but we're not aware of any, because the fund in Nithsdale has not been open for general applications for a few years now. We're not aware of any groups other than village halls who are looking to restart. We know that there's some village halls looking to who would welcome some funding, but that would be to cover running costs. And as the leaders just pointed out, as we're heading into our in the midst of this third wave, there could be an impact on village halls. So you could be in a situation where you're funding things that may not be able to happen in the not too distant future. So not aware of any groups who are desperately in need of funding, but I'm quite sure groups across Nithsdale would always welcome an additional fund that they can attract funding from.
Thanks, Derek. Tracy, is that a legacy hand, or do you want to come back in?
Going to put it down. No, that's great. I've got no objection about carrying it forward to September too.
Brilliant. So carry it forward to September with a hope that in December we will simply bring this matter to conclusion, either open applications wholly, partially, or keep the whole fund until the following financial year, and that will be decided hopefully in September. You can reflect that in your report in September, Derek. That'd be brilliant.
I wonder if we need to maybe pull together a seminar, Chair, just in advance of me bringing that report, so we can get an idea of the priorities that members maybe wish to allocate that funding to. Would that be appropriate, Chair?
Happy, on the basis that it's not a decision-making seminar. It would only be discussion on what we might want to do, and you would then draw some kind of recommendations based on the discussions. I would be happy with that. Members are content.
Yeah, I would welcome that opportunity, Chair, just so that we know the direction members are thinking. Obviously, it's not a decision-making body, but that would allow me to inform the recommendations in the report and pull together so that if members were minded to open after that committee meeting, we're ready to hit the ground running and with the criteria and such like in place.
Okay, so we just delegate to you and Fiona collectively to find a space in the diary and invite members.
Yeah, that'd be good, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Derek. Okay, and we'll come to the last part of the recommendations, which is to agree the priorities, eligibility and criteria for the National Area Committee Poverty and Inequalities Grant in Appendix 2, and agree to open for applications to the National Area Committee Inequalities Grant, Poverty and Inequalities Grant, and the timetable outlined in paragraph 318. So, members, you've got on page 13 the proposed timetable. You've got Appendix 2, which sets out the priorities, eligibility and criteria. So we probably better look at it first and then agree the timetable. Wendy, I'm sure you'll be able to help us with this with a wee discussion at the seminar. Again, there's no decisions made, but I see there's now a set of priorities set out in Appendix 2. You want to take us through them? I just got to have members offer an observation if they've got any before we agree them.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy for any members to ask anything or to put forward any observations, if that's okay with you, Chair. Thanks.
Thanks, Wendy. So we've got the priorities. This is on page 17, Appendix 2. Digital connectivity, food insecurity, increasing dignity and self-esteem, supporting independent living to vulnerable, pre-vulnerable clients, helping to stay in their own homes, transport, upskilling, employability, fuel poverty, financial management projects and projects that prevent individuals and families from falling into poverty. David Stitt.
Wee question on page 13, Jim, about the proposed timescale. It's not a big timescale for the 2nd of July to 8th of September. When you take the 1st and 2nd of July to 6th of August, that's only about 5 weeks. Would that be appropriate, or would that
I'll ask Derek, but I'd imagine most folk will be clued up and be waiting for this to come on stream, because it's in the public domain that we have this money and we're just deciding what how to manage the dispersal or share out. Derek and Wendy, can you come in and let us know whether, in your opinion, it's a reasonable timescale?
Yeah, absolutely, Chair. I think we are mindful that it is a week shorter than we would like. We normally give applicants 6 weeks to complete the application process. Just to tie in with the committee cycle, it's a bit shorter, but I'm sure Wendy will agree. Groups are well aware of this fund going through the process, and they are eagerly anticipating it opening from Friday.
Cheers, Derek. Thanks.
Thanks, David. Thanks for that. Well, since David he raised the discussion on 318, so anybody else have any issues on 318? That's the page 13, the proposed timescale. 2nd of July, which is Friday, we open. 6th of August, deadline. Week commencing 9th of August, compliance checks will be completed. That'll be an officer matter. Week 16, scoring panel assessments. That'll also be an officer led matter, and then we will receive the application set out in a report for us, and we will decide what we want to support. That be right, Derek?
That's correct, Chair.
Anybody got any observations on that? If not, right, we'll go back to Appendix 2, which is simply the priorities, eligibility and criteria. So we've talked about the priorities. Eligibility is application can only be accepted from constitutional organisation. I think we would agree that's fair and reasonable, because that way we can manage and scrutinise rather than trying to chase individuals. Applications which allow organisations to diversify from their core activities, projects and services. We also welcomed food banks providing funding for fuel cards for the neglected group provisions. This is one that we talked about, and we tried to make sure that new as well as existing organisations could apply. Requests for 100% of the total cost of the project will not be considered. Now we can amend that to unlikely to be considered, because I think that was one of the discussions we had at the seminar, or whether we're happy with that, because we'll still probably get applications. Even if we put that in there, we'll still get folk asking for 100%, I would imagine. I'm happy to folk either amend it or leave as is. Looks like we're leaving as is. The next criteria 5 is application will only be accepted for projects will be delivered within the industrial area. Oh, leaders, quite right, leave as is, okay, thank you. Application will only be accepted for projects will be delivered within the industrial area. Organisations wishing to deliver a multi-area project must apply separate to each area committee, outlining the specific impact on each particular area applied to. The only thing, John Martin, we agreed that Derek would explore with the contractor the opportunity for the school's lighting programme and report back in September if that was a goer, and it would form part of the use of the £8,500 that was unaccounted for in the amount of money we committed to the overall Christmas light project. Is that right, Derek?
Yeah, that's right. 7,560 additional contingency. Right. We would look to engage as part of the contract with whoever gets the contract to see if they could run the schools competition.
That's
brilliant.
Well, that's fine. That's fine, Jim. I put that in because I thought we were getting near the end. I just thought I'd come in just. No,
I'm going to go with the recommendations anyway, John, and just get Derek to rehearse each one and what we'd actually agreed. But you're right. We're on the last one. We're like in a final run now. So we're talking about applications only to be accepted if they're for Nithsdale, and if they're for multi-area, they have to apply to each particular area of the committee. Members will be content with that because that's what we've always tried to do. This is one Ivor was keen to see, and applications for collaborative projects were welcome and encouraged. This is defined as at least 2 different constituted groups working in conjunction to deliver the project or service as described within the application form. And again, officers will deal with that if that comes in. 7 projects which are currently being delivered by the Dumfries and Galloway Council, the NHS, or jointly with additional partners through the Integration Joint Board will not be considered. And that's to make sure they're not just raking in funds for a variety of council departments, and we're trying to just protect our resource to be better channeled where it should be. And last, applications for religious groups will only be considered for projects which do not include religious activities. And you'll remember, members, there was a debate about one group providing food to families, and it was coming from a church hall, and initially it was refused, and that's why this was introduced. So I'm sure we'll all be comfortable with that. The criteria, applications, this one must demonstrate how the project service delivery directly contributes to community planning, partnership, poverty and inequality strategy objectives. Applicants or applications are encouraged from new and or previous recipients for projects which will further support clients to escape or be removed from the cycle of poverty. Applicants should clearly demonstrate how the project will make a positive difference to the individuals and families which it will support both during and beyond the funded period, and how it will help prevent people falling into poverty. Although we did discuss at the seminar, we wouldn't want, and it's inherent in this, although it's not particularly set out, we wouldn't want to refuse folk if they were only delivering for a particular COVID-19 crisis. It says beyond, but some, for very apparent reasons, might not want to go beyond the COVID-19 crisis, but nevertheless, we'd still consider supporting them if that was appropriate.
I think we've added, covered that under the next point, Chair. I think we've added a wee bit in just to make that quite explicit.
Oh, okay, that's fine, Derek. That's in 12, aye?
Yes.
Unless outcomes were achieved and delivered, well done, that's right. That's okay, that's covered. It's not anticipated, there's another thing folk were keen to have in, it's not anticipated that awards will exceed 10,000 for single organisation applications or £20,000 for collaborative projects approach. And that was because, I think it was Tracy, but somebody thought we might have a really good opportunity to support a couple of organisations that would go beyond the maximum. So we've said it's not anticipated, therefore we're not just blankly refusing.
Yep.
Two other things. Members in this area committee will make the final decision on the amount of funding which is granted to each project. We've always taken that approach. And all successful grant applicants must agree to attend at least one networking event held by the Free Galloway Council and Third Sector in Region Galloway during the term of the project, where recipients may be invited to share their experiences. That's just best practice that someone would always want to see. So if members are happy with that, are we happy to go with these recommendations as set out by Wendy and Derek in this report?
Agreed.
Happy to agree, Jim.
Brilliant. Folks, thanks very much. I'll just get Derek one last time, and Wendy, if need be, to remind us what each of the recommendation is on his report, because there are minor amendments, and then we'll come to a decision. Derek, can you just
I don't know if Claire might be better. Claire, have you got a better note than me? I can maybe try. My writing's a bit like a hen.
Well, governance anyway. So Claire, can you take us through each of these recommendations, just and add the wee amendments that we've added?
Okay, right. We're going back to recommendation 2.1. Then you agreed to the initial 41k, but adding in the 7,560 to allow for some flexibility. Should lighting be required, and also to build in for the schools competition. There's also agreement to investigate breakdown of previous year's figures.
And can you just make sure we add in that every column in each of these communities that has a light fitting should receive a decoration? Yes. Because currently that doesn't happen. They shrunk over the years, Claire, when some light fittings broken and their replacements, they simply centralised all the light fittings and left the ones in the periphery without any attachment. So that should form part of the same overall, and obviously it's officers' discretion working with roads what capacity we've got to accommodate that. Yes. I think we'd want to prioritise the schools programme and then go to additional lighting if there's only funding left for that. Can you encapsulate that, Claire, in some form of words that make sense?
Yes, certainly. I'll make sure the minute reflects that.
Chair, sorry, before we move on, can I just confirm the schools competition, is that done in all 4 areas, or is that just done in Dumfries?
No, it was all 4 areas. Each group had their design, and last time it was John Martin, and I don't care who it is that does it. John Martin and some other colleague that looked at all the kids' drawings and chose, I think it was 3 different drawings from each school to make up to signs for that particular community. So the kids had actually ownership of the Christmas lights. John, do you recall that was right?
Yes, Jill Dykes done it for Upper. She was there for Upper Nithsdale the last time we did it, I think. And I'm not exactly sure who the third person was. It might have been Andy Ferguson, I think it was.
And we'll sort that out when we get to the decision if we get that opportunity.
Thanks,
I'm sure Tracy will be keen to do the Dumfries, and we'll worry about the Upper Nithsdale later on. Fine, Claire. The rest of the decision, please. 2.2.
Okay, 2.2 was to basically stay as it is in the papers. 2.3 stay as it is, but with the addition for a further report to come back in September.
Thank you.
2.4, again, recognising there's a change in the figures there. It's now 68,067 because of the money being put over to the Christmas lights. And again, a report coming back in September for a decision.
Brilliant.
2.5 and 2.6 got agreed as they are in the papers.
Members content with that?
Agreed.
Happy.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, folks. Thanks for your indulgence and your attendance today. That was very helpful. That concludes today's business. Our next meeting will take place on Wednesday, the 8th of September 2021. And Derek has a wee bit of work to do for us during the holiday period and we'll look forward to getting his reports in September. Thanks very much, members.
Cheers.
Have a good
There's
day
one
and
starting across the way.
enjoy your
Another meeting.
holidays. Thanks, folks.